The cold wind blew hard through the empty streets of New Seattle Outpost. It was night, and snowflakes fell gently from the dark sky. Neon signs flickered, casting strange lights on the broken roads. Most people were inside, safe and warm, but in the shadows, two alien girls walked barefoot through the cold. Their feet were red and swollen, their thin legs shaking with every step. The older one held the younger close, wrapping her own arms around her. Their clothes were torn, wet from the snow, and barely covered their glowing alien skin. They didn't speak much, only soft whispers in their native language. They were scared someone would hear them, or worse, catch them. No one stopped to help. Some people saw them from their windows but quickly looked away. Others walked by, with their heads down, pretending not to see the two glowing girls. To them, the girls were just more alien refugees, and no one wanted to get involved. The older girl, maybe 16, searched the streets for food or shelter. Her name was Carrie, and she had once lived on a warm planet with flowers and music. Now, all she had was her younger sister Lyra, and a half-broken necklace from their mother. They had escaped from a slave ship 3 days ago. They hid in a shipping crate and were thrown out near Earth during a scan check. No ID, no clothes, no hope. Lyra, only 8, could barely walk. She had stopped talking that morning, and Kari feared she was getting sick. Her hands were ice cold, and her lips had turned blue. Kari held her tighter and looked around desperately. An old alley between two buildings seemed empty. They crawled inside and hid behind a trash bin. Kari found a cardboard box and used it to cover Lyra. She whispered, "Just sleep, little moon." In her alien tongue, Lyra closed her eyes, shivering. Her body curled tight. Kari sat beside her, hugging her close, trying not to cry. She couldn't let Lyra see her cry. It would make her more afraid. Time passed slowly, the night growing darker and colder. Kari's own fingers were numb, her feet bleeding from cuts. She hadn't eaten in 2 days, and her vision started to blur. She looked up at the cloudy sky and whispered, "Is there anyone out there who still cares?" Just then, footsteps echoed in the alley. Kari's body tensed, and she pulled Lyra closer. A tall figure was walking slowly past the alley entrance. Kari stayed quiet, hiding. Holding her breath, the man stopped. He turned his head toward the alley. Kari's glowing eyes met his for a brief second. He took a step closer, and Kari's heart raced. She thought, is he a patrol? A hunter? Another bad man? But the man knelt down, setting his backpack on the ground. He wore a warm brown jacket and had tired eyes. His name was Ethan, a former soldier who had lost everything in the last galactic war. He lived alone now, working small jobs, trying to forget the past. But something about the two glowing shapes in the dark stopped him cold. He didn't speak right away. Instead, he pulled out a silver thermos and opened the cap. "Steam rose hot tea." He set it gently on the ground and said, "Softly, it's warm. Take it if you want." Kari didn't move. Her hands tightened around Lyra's shoulders. Ethan looked at them, then slowly took off his scarf and placed it nearby. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said quietly. "You shouldn't be out here in this cold." Kari finally spoke, her voice dry and weak. "We have nowhere." Her English was broken, but Ethan understood the pain in her words. He looked at Lyra, barely breathing under the box. "Is she okay?" he asked. Kari shook her head slowly. Tears slipped down her cheeks, freezing on her skin. "She cold. She's sick, please." Ethan's heart clenched. In all his years of war, he had seen pain, but nothing like this. Not two little girls, shivering and starving in an alley. He stood up, pulled his coat off, and wrapped it around Kari. She gasped, softly, unused to such warmth. Then he lifted Lyra gently, holding her like a fragile doll. "She needs heat. She needs food," he said, almost to himself. Then, looking into Kari's shocked eyes, he added, "You both do." Kari blinked, stunned by the man's kindness. No one had spoken to them like that in weeks. She stepped closer, unsure, afraid. It was a trick, but the man smiled just a little, and for the first time, Kari felt a strange warmth inside, not from the coat, but from the words that followed. Both of you. Come home. Ethan's arms were full as he carried the younger alien girl through the icy streets. Her glowing skin felt cold as stone, and her breath was faint but steady. Beside him, Kari walked slowly, still confused, still scared. Her alien feet left blood spots in the snow, but she didn't complain. She looked up at the man from time to time, unsure if he was truly helping them or taking them somewhere worse. But the man didn't speak much, he just kept his eyes forward. Walking fast but carefully, after a few blocks, he turned into a small, quiet building. It looked like an old warehouse converted into a home. Metal walls, a blinking keypad, and a solar lamp by the door. Ethan placed his thumb on the scanner, and the door clicked open. Warm air rushed out, carrying the smell of bread and old leather. Kari hesitated at the doorway, looking inside nervously. Ethan turned back to her and gently said, "It's okay, come in. You're safe here." She stepped in slowly, holding the broken necklace around her neck like a charm. The warmth hit her like a wave, making her legs shake. She almost collapsed, but Ethan caught her with one hand while carrying Lyra in the other. He laid Lyra gently on a soft couch near the heater and gave Kari a warm blanket. Kari didn't speak, just stared in silence, taking everything in. The room was small but clean. One couch, a table full of tools, and shelves filled with books and strange machines. There was a faded photo on the wall, Ethan with a woman and a child. Long gone. Kari's eyes stopped on the photo for a moment. A family. Something she had forgotten how to imagine. Ethan knelt beside the couch and placed his fingers gently on Lyra's wrist. "She's alive, just freezing," he muttered to himself. Then he looked at Kari, who stood like a statue, afraid to sit. "Why were you out there?" he asked softly. His voice was calm, not demanding, just curious. Kari took a deep breath, her voice quiet and broken. "Ship left us. We hide. No food. No place." Ethan nodded, understanding the pieces. "You escaped from a ship?" She nodded slowly. "Bad ship. Slave ship. We run. Hide in box." "Wake up. Here." Ethan's jaw clenched, his eyes darkening. He had heard of such things, alien traffickers dumping their cargo to avoid patrol scans, but to see the result right in front of him, it made his stomach twist. He stood up and walked to the kitchen, pouring hot water into 2 cups. Kari watched every move carefully, unsure if she could trust the kindness. He returned with a cup and held it out. "Tea," he said simply. Kari reached out with shaking hands and took it. The warmth almost burned her fingers at first, but she didn't let go. She sipped slowly. The taste strange but good, like leaves and warmth and safety all mixed together. After a long silence, Ethan asked, "What's your name?" Kari hesitated, her lips trembling. "Kari," she whispered. He pointed to the younger girl on the couch. "She your sister?" Kari nodded quickly. "Yes, Lyra, my only." Ethan smiled gently. "I'm Ethan," he said. Tapping his chest, Kari tilted her head, repeating softly, Then," he chuckled. Then looked at her with more seriousness. "You're not safe out there, Kari. Not on Earth. Not alone." Kari lowered her head, her fingers gripping the mug tightly. She whispered, "No one help us. Everyone run. They see. They hate." Ethan sighed, sitting down on the floor across from her. "Not everyone," he said. "Some people still care." Kari looked at him, her eyes wide. "No want money?" she asked suddenly. Ethan blinked, confused. "What?" "Other humans," she said carefully, "only help for money. Or to hurt." Ethan's heart broke a little at that. He didn't answer for a moment, just looked at Lyra sleeping. Then he said quietly, "You're not cargo. You're not for sale. You're just kids." Kari didn't know what to say to that. No one had ever called her a child before, not since the mines. Not since her mother died. After a few more minutes, Kari finally sat down beside her sister. She touched Lyra's cheek and smiled a little. The heater hummed in the background, soft and warm. Ethan stood up and brought a small bowl of food-hot soup with bread. He placed it gently near her and said, "Eat, then rest. We'll talk later." Kari looked at the bowl, then at Ethan. She opened her mouth to speak. But no words came. Instead, tears ran down her face silently, not from pain, but from something strange and unfamiliar. "Hope, would you like me to continue with part 3 now? Or create Leonardo AI prompts for this part 2? Kari had never seen a room like this before. Soft lights glowed from the ceiling, not harsh and buzzing like prison lamps. The floor was clean, smooth, and warm beneath her aching feet. And the smell warm bread, boiled broth, and something sweet made her stomach growl. She quickly placed a hand over her belly, embarrassed. Lyra was wrapped in 2 thick blankets now, sleeping peacefully for the first time in days. Her chest rose and fell slowly, and color had started to return to her cheeks. Kari sat close, her back straight and her eyes alert. Though her body ached, she didn't let herself relax, not yet. Ethan moved quietly around the small home. He made no sudden movements, no raised voice, and no loud machines. Instead, he placed a warm towel next to the heater, poured hot soup into 2 bowls, and set a soft pair of socks and an old sweater on the armrest, all of it. "For them, you can take a shower," he said gently, pointing to a door down the hall. Kari didn't understand at first. She looked at the door, confused, then at him. Unsure what he meant, Ethan paused, then smiled and pointed to himself. Pretending to scrub his arms, Kari blinked, then nodded slowly, understanding. She stood up carefully, still hugging the blanket around her body. Ethan turned away politely, giving her space. The hallway light flickered once as she stepped into the bathroom. The moment she closed the door, she froze, staring around in awe. Everything was strange. A sink, a toilet, a mirror, and the shining glass box that held warm rain. Steam rose from the shower as she touched the button carefully. Warm water burst out, hitting her skin, and she gasped. Her knees hit the floor, not from pain, but shock. She had never felt warmth that didn't burn, never felt clean water that didn't stink of rust or chemicals. Kari began to cry, her sobs lost in the sound of running water. She scrubbed at her arms, her legs, her thin face, over and over, as if trying to erase the months of fear, dirt, and chains. The water washed away the grime, and something deeper. When she came out, her hair dripping, she wore the oversized sweater and socks. They were too big, but they were warm, soft, and safe. Ethan looked up from the table and nodded gently. He didn't say anything, just pushed the bowl of soup toward her. Kari sat down slowly and picked up the spoon. The soup was thick, full of vegetables and rice, strange taste to her. But it was delicious, and she ate it all quietly, without stopping. She didn't even realize she was crying again until the last spoonful. "Good?" Ethan asked with a soft smile. Kari nodded quickly, wiping her eyes with her sleeve. She whispered, "Very." Then she looked up, finally meeting his eyes. "Why?" "Help?" she asked slowly. Her English was broken, but her meaning was clear. Ethan leaned back in his chair and looked at the small fire crackling in the heater. "I saw 2 children freezing to death," he said, "and I had space in my house." He looked at her again, adding, "That was enough reason." Kari didn't speak, but she held those words deep in her heart. They were soft and simple, like bread after a famine. She turned to check on Lyra again, who was now gently snoring. The little one looked almost peaceful. That night, Ethan offered Kari the bed in his small sleeping room. She refused at first, shaking her head firmly, but he insisted, placing another blanket on the mattress and saying, "You need real rest. I'll stay out here." He took a pillow and moved to the couch in the main room. Kari stared at the warm bed for a long time. Before slowly lying down beside Lyra, she covered them both and held her sister close, for the first time in many nights. There were no alarms, no screaming guards, no pain, only silence, warm air, and the soft hum of safety. Kari whispered something in her alien language, an old song their mother once sang. Lyra murmured in her sleep, smiling just a little, and Kari finally closed her eyes. Somewhere in the other room, Ethan lay on the couch, staring at the ceiling. He had no idea who these girls truly were. He didn't know their species, their past, or what trouble might follow. But he knew one thing clearly. They didn't deserve to freeze to death in the snow. Not on his watch, not ever again. Morning light slipped in through the window. Soft and golden, Kari opened her eyes slowly, unsure where she was. The room was too warm, too quiet, and too peaceful. For a moment, she panicked, thinking maybe it had all been a dream. Then she felt Lyra's tiny hand curled in hers, and the warm blanket over both of them. They were still safe. She sat up gently, brushing Lyra's silver-white hair out of her face. Lyra didn't wake, but her breathing was stronger now. Her skin, once pale and frozen, now glowed with soft color again. Kari smiled and kissed her sister's forehead. She stepped out of the room and walked into the main space. Ethan was already up, standing near the small stove. He had a mug in his hand and was flipping something in a pan, eggs and toast. He turned when he heard her steps, smiling. "Morning," he said softly. Kari paused, unsure what to say. She looked around the room again. Everything so clean, so calm, it didn't feel real. "Morning," she replied slowly, testing the word on her tongue. Ethan handed her a slice of toast and nodded toward the chair. "Sit, eat, you need it." Kari sat down, her fingers brushing crumbs off the plate, as if they were jewels. She ate slowly this time, not like last night, when hunger took over. This time, she enjoyed the taste, the warmth, and the silence. Ethan sat across from her, sipping his coffee and watching quietly. "You slept okay?" Kari looked down at the toast and whispered, "Yes, first time." "No dream," he nodded, understanding more than words could explain. Later that day, Kari helped wash the dishes. She stared at the soap bubbles like they were magic. Ethan showed her how to rinse and dry, and Kari watched every step with care. When he smiled and said, "You're a fast learner," she didn't answer, but a small smile touched her lips for the first time. Lyra finally woke, her small voice calling out. Kari rushed to her, tears already in her eyes. Lyra sat up slowly, still weak, but smiling. Ethan brought her warm water and a small bowl of soup. Lyra looked at him, blinked twice, then whispered, "You good?" Ethan chuckled, ruffling her messy hair. "I try." That afternoon, Kari found an old music player in Ethan's toolbox. She pressed a button, and strange earth music filled the room, soft, jazzy sounds. Lyra clapped her hands, swaying slowly to the beat. Kari laughed softly, then spun around in a small circle. Her steps were unsure at first, but her feet remembered old rhythms from home. She danced not for anyone else, just for herself. Ethan stood at the doorway, watching with a soft look in his eyes. He hadn't seen joy in this house for years, not since the war, not since he lost his family. But these two alien girls had filled it with laughter in less than a day. That night, Kari sat by the window, tracing alien runes onto the glass with her fingertip. Ethan sat nearby, polishing a broken drone. After a while, she spoke, her voice quiet and thoughtful. "We stay?" Ethan looked up, confused. "We stay, or you give us to police?" He set the drone down and leaned forward. "No one's taking you," he said calmly. Kari looked unsure. So he added, "This is your home now. You're not going anywhere." Her eyes welled with tears again, but she wiped them away quickly. She looked back out the window and whispered, "I want to live, not just run." The next few days passed slowly but gently. Kari learned how to cook toast without burning it. Lyra started drawing alien symbols with colored pencils. Ethan had forgotten he even owned. Sometimes Ethan would show them how to fix old tech. Sometimes they just sat and listened to music together. No talking, just living. But behind all the peace, one thing stayed: fear. Kari would still flinch at loud knocks. Lyra would still sleep with her hand gripping her sister's sleeve. And Ethan noticed how both girls would freeze if someone walked past the window. Too slowly, they were safe, but their scars ran deep, still for the first time. They weren't just surviving. They were learning to live again, together. The wind outside howled like a wounded beast, but inside Ethan's home, warmth and laughter filled the air. Kari stirred soup in the pot, humming softly in her alien tongue. Lyra sat on the floor, building a tiny tower from old batteries and toy parts. Ethan stood by the workbench, watching them with quiet pride. For the first time in a long time, his home felt alive. He hadn't realized how empty the silence had been, until these two filled it with light. Kari's hair was neatly brushed. Now her skin no longer pale and cracked. Lyra's cheeks were rounder, her steps stronger. They were healing not just in body, but in spirit. But peace doesn't last long in stories like this. It started with a knock, 3 sharp bangs on the metal door. Kari froze, the spoon slipping from her hand. Lyra dropped her toy tower and ran to her sister. Ethan turned, his face already serious. "No one ever knocks here," he said quietly. He walked to the door and checked the outside cam. 2 men stood there, dark uniforms, shiny badges, government agents. Ethan took a deep breath and opened the door just a little. "Can I help you?" he asked calmly. One of the agents, tall and cold-faced, held up a scanner. "We've traced alien biosigns to this address," he said flatly. "We need to inspect your property for unauthorized off-worlders." Ethan didn't move. "There are no criminals here," he replied firmly. The second agent, younger and more curious, stepped closer. "We're just following protocol, sir. There's been a rise in smuggling. Some aliens bring diseases. Others escape from illegal ships." Behind Ethan, Kari and Lyra were hiding in the hallway, listening. Kari gripped Lyra's hand so tightly it hurt, but neither of them spoke. They had heard voices like these before, on other planets, in other nightmares. They knew what would happen if they were taken again. Ethan looked the agents dead in the eye. "They're just children," he said. "Not smugglers. Not criminals. They've done nothing wrong." The tall agent didn't blink. "Earth law requires all non-registered species to be reported. You're harboring illegal beings." Ethan's jaw clenched. "I'm harboring survivors," he said sharply. "Is that illegal now?" The agents tried to push past him, but Ethan blocked the doorway with his body. "You step 1 foot in this house without a warrant, and you'll regret it," he growled. His voice was calm, but it held the edge of a man who had faced worse and survived. The agents paused, surprised by his resistance. The younger one lowered his voice. "Look, we don't want trouble. But if anyone finds out—" "They won't," Ethan interrupted. "They're safe here. And I will fight to keep them that way." Behind him, Kari's eyes widened. No one had ever stood up for her, not like this, not when it mattered. She stepped forward, trembling, and whispered, "We can go." "If we make trouble." Ethan turned around, eyes softening. "No," he said. "You don't run anymore." He looked at the agents, his voice firm again. "If you take them, you'll have to go through me." There was a long, heavy silence. Then the younger agent pulled a form from his satchel and quietly slid it forward. "It's not common, but there is a process," he said, almost under his breath. "If you sign this, you become their temporary guardian. It buys time, at least 6 months." Ethan took the paper and read it. His fingers were steady as he picked up a pen and signed his name without hesitation. "Done," he said. The older agent frowned but said nothing. The 2 men turned and walked back into the snow, their footprints vanishing behind them. When the door shut, Kari collapsed to her knees, shaking. Lyra ran into Ethan's arms, crying softly. Ethan picked her up, holding her like she was made of glass. Kari looked up at him, voice cracking. "You fight for us." Ethan looked at her and gave a soft nod. "You're not alone anymore," he said. "I'm not your owner, not your boss, just the guy who opened his door and found 2 reasons to care again." That night, they sat by the fire. In silence, Carrie placed the signed paper on the table, staring at the name written at the bottom, Ethan Ward, temporary guardian. She whispered to herself in her native language, maybe. This is what family feels like. Asterisk. The days that followed were quiet. But this time, the quiet wasn't empty. It was full of soft voices, small laughter, and the sound of life returning. Carrie had begun to hum while cooking. She wore one of Ethan's old shirts tied at the waist, and she smiled more often. Lyra liked to sit on the table and color using pencils Ethan bought just for her. She drew strange symbols from her culture, stars with wings, trees with glowing roots. When Ethan asked her what they meant, she simply said, safe things. Ethan watched them both closely. He wasn't a man who used to smile much, but now he did. When Kari proudly showed him how she could use the old toaster without burning it, he laughed. When Lyra tried to sneak cookies before dinner, he playfully scolded her like a real dad. Something had shifted in the house, and in their hearts. It was no longer his home, it was their home. Not built with blood, or law, or DNA, but with small kindnesses and choice. One morning, Ethan took them to a refugee center in the nearby district. It wasn't perfect, but it had books, toys, and other aliens who had come to Earth for safety. Kari was nervous at first, hiding behind Ethan. But soon she met a girl with green skin and 4 arms, who smiled and said, I like your hair. Kari blinked and smiled back. It was the first time she felt like she belonged somewhere beyond just Ethan's house. Meanwhile, Lyra found a small human boy building a tower with glowing cubes. She sat next to him and copied his moves. No one yelled, no one stared, for the first time in her life. She wasn't strange, she was just a child playing that night. Ethan made a simple dinner, mashed roots and grilled meat from the market. Kari lit candles instead of using harsh lights. Lyra placed her latest drawing on the table, a stick figure of Ethan, holding hands with 2 small aliens. Underneath, she had written a single word in broken earth script. Home. Ethan stared at the picture for a long time before saying softly, You two are trouble. Kari giggled, and Lyra smiled with cookie crumbs on her face. But, he added, you're my trouble now. They were becoming a family, not because someone told them to, but because they had chosen each other. But even the warmest homes cast long shadows. Late that night, after the girls were asleep, Ethan stepped outside to take a breath. He stared up at the stars, silent, bright, and far away. Then he saw it. A dark figure standing across the street, not moving, not speaking, just watching. Ethan stepped forward, eyes narrowing. Can I help you? He called out, but the figure turned and disappeared into the alley without a word. Ethan's hand went to the small blade he still kept near the door, just in case. He didn't sleep well that night. Something had changed in the air, something was coming inside. Kari curled up next to Lyra on the couch. Even in sleep, she held her sister close. Ethan looked at them both, then locked the door extra tight. He didn't know who that man was or what he wanted, but he made a silent promise. No one is taking them from me. Not ever. The next day started like any other. Lyra chased a floating cleaning drone around the room, giggling. Kari washed dishes while humming a melody from her childhood, and Ethan sat by the window, sipping warm coffee and watching the quiet street. But in the back of his mind, something stayed sharp. That figure from last night, just watching, and he was right to worry. At sunset, the sky turned orange and deep purple. The family was setting the table for dinner when a noise shattered the peace. A hard knock at the door, loud and fast, followed by a second and a third, not friendly, not casual. Ethan's face turned to stone. Kari froze mid-step, and Lyra dropped her fork. Ethan stood up, grabbed the small stun weapon from under the cabinet, then slowly opened the door just a crack. Standing there was a tall, thin alien man, with dark skin like burnt metal and cold yellow eyes. His clothes were expensive, his posture proud, but his smile sharp and cruel, was the kind Ethan had seen before on warlords and slavers. I've come for my property, the man said. voice smooth like poison. Kari let out a gasp. Backing away and pulling Lyra behind her, the man continued, 2 escaped girls. Stolen from my ship. They're mine by contract. Ethan stepped outside fully, closing the door behind him. They're not property. Not anymore, he said coldly. The slaver's eyes narrowed. You protect them? You risk your life for aliens? I protect children, Ethan replied. They deserve better than chains, the slaver signaled. And 2 more thugs appeared, one with a blade, one with a shock rod. Ethan didn't flinch. He'd been outnumbered before. He'd bled before. And this time he had something worth bleeding for. Inside the house, Kari pulled Lyra close and whispered. We don't run this time, Lyra nodded, even though her hands shook outside. The first thug rushed forward, swinging the rod. Ethan ducked, punched, then stunned him with a crack of light from the small weapon. The second came fast, slashing, but Ethan blocked with his arm and kicked him into the snow. Then the slaver pulled a hidden weapon from his coat. You think you're a hero, human? He spat. Ethan's voice was calm but fierce. I don't care about being a hero, he said. I care about them. Just then, bright lights flashed behind them. 2 patrol vehicles screeched to a halt. The agents from before stepped out. Weapons raised. The younger one shouted, Drop the weapon and step away. The slaver froze, then hissed in anger. You'll pay for this. He spat before being cuffed and dragged away. Kari opened the door slowly, eyes wide with disbelief. Ethan stepped inside, face scratched, one sleeve torn but alive. Lyra ran to him, wrapping her arms around his waist and crying into his shirt. Kari followed, placing her hand gently on his chest. You fought for us, she whispered. Ethan smiled, breathless. Of course I did. Later that night, after the chaos was gone and the house was quiet again, Kari walked into the room with a small box in her hands. It was old and made of alien crystal, something she had kept hidden in her clothes all this time. She opened it, revealing a small glowing stone on a chain. She held it out to Ethan. What's this? He asked. It's from our mother, Kari said. It's called a soul token. In our culture we give it only once. To the one we trust with our life. Ethan stared at it, speechless. Kari placed it gently around his neck and said with trembling words, You are not just our rescuer. You are our father now. Lyra nodded and added with a soft giggle, Papa. Ethan felt something deep in his chest shift and settle, something he hadn't felt in years. Family, not the one he lost, but the one he had now. That night, as they sat by the window watching the stars above, 3 shadows huddled together under one blanket, no longer cold, no longer lost. A man, a girl, and her sister, a family made not by blood, but by love stronger than chains.